Postmodern critical theory in literature is a branch of literary criticism that emerged in the late 20th century and sought to challenge the traditional ways of understanding and interpreting literature. It draws on the ideas of postmodernism, which reject grand narratives and the idea of a stable, coherent reality. Postmodern critical theory drew on a variety of intellectual traditions, including structuralism, Marxism, psychoanalysis, and linguistics. These approaches emphasized the role of language, power, and ideology in shaping meaning, and argued that traditional literary criticism was too focused on the individual author or work of literature, and failed to recognize the ways in which meaning was constructed through social and cultural contexts. Some key concepts in postmodern critical literary theory include deconstruction. This is a method of literary analysis that seeks to reveal the ways in which language and meaning are constructed, and to challenge the idea of a stable, coherent reality. Deconstruction involves examining the contradictions and inconsistencies within a text, as well as the ways in which language shapes our understanding of the world. Intertextuality. Postmodern critics emphasize the ways in which texts are interconnected, and how meaning is constructed through the interaction between different texts. Intertextuality involves the recognition that every text is influenced by, and in conversation with, other texts that have come before it. The death of the author. Postmodern critics reject the idea that the author is the sole source of meaning in a text. Instead, they argue that meaning is constructed through the interaction between the text and its readers, and that the author's intentions are not necessarily relevant to the interpretation of a text. Fragmentation and discontinuity. Postmodern critics emphasize the fragmented and discontinuous nature of contemporary culture, and argue that this is reflected in literature. This often involves the use of nonlinear narrative structures, and the rejection of traditional narrative conventions. Power and ideology. Postmodern critics are interested in how power operates in literature, and how it reinforces or challenges dominant ideologies and cultural norms. This involves examining the power relationships between authors, readers, and characters, as well as the ways in which language and discourse are used to construct meaning and shape our understanding of the world. Metafiction. This is a technique used in postmodern literature in which the text draws attention to its own status as a work of fiction. This involves breaking the fourth wall, and challenging the reader's assumptions about the nature of fiction and reality. There are several key theorists of postmodern literary theory who have made significant contributions to the field. Some of the most influential include Jean-François Lyotard was an influential French philosopher and literary theorist who made significant contributions to postmodernist literary theory. His work was characterized by a skepticism towards grand narratives or metanarratives, which he believed had been discredited by the events of the 20th century. Lyotard's most famous work on postmodernism is The Postmodern Condition, in which he argued that contemporary society is characterized by a loss of faith in grand narratives or metanarratives. He claimed that these narratives had been undermined by the proliferation of different discourses and the fragmentation of knowledge. He argued that the postmodern condition was reflected in literature, which often subverted traditional narrative structures and emphasized fragmentation and discontinuity. Lyotard's ideas on language, discourse, and power were also influential in postmodernist literary theory. He believed that language was always part of a larger system of power relations, and that meaning was constructed through the interaction of different discourses. He emphasized the importance of difference and diversity, and rejected the idea of a single, universal truth or narrative. Jean Baudrillard was a French philosopher and cultural critic who made important contributions to postmodern critical theory, particularly in the areas of media studies, consumer culture, and simulation. Baudrillard's most famous work is Simulacra and Simulation, in which he argues that contemporary society is characterized by a proliferation of simulations, in which images and representations of reality are substituted for the real thing. He claimed that these simulations have become more real than reality itself, and that we have entered a state of hyper-reality in which it is difficult to distinguish between the real and the simulated. Baudrillard's ideas about the nature of reality and the impact of technology and media on our perceptions of reality were influential in postmodernist literary theory. He emphasized the importance of language, images, and representations in constructing meaning, and rejected the idea of a stable, objective reality. He also argued that contemporary literature and art should reflect the fragmented and hyperreal nature of contemporary culture. Jacques Derrida. Derrida is known for his work on deconstruction, which emphasizes the importance of the instability of language and meaning. He argued that language is always marked by difference and that meaning is constructed through a process of decentering and dislocation. Michel Foucault. Foucault is known for his work on power and knowledge. He argued that power is not simply repressive but also productive, and that knowledge is always shaped by relations of power. His work on the relationship between power and discourse has been influential in postmodernist literary theory. Frederick Jameson. Jameson is known for his work on postmodernism and the cultural logic of late capitalism. He argued that postmodernism represents a new stage in the development of capitalism and that its cultural expressions reflect the fragmentation and dislocation of contemporary society. These theorists, among others, have made significant contributions to the development of postmodern literary theory, and their ideas continue to be influential in contemporary literary and cultural studies. Postmodern literary critics ask a range of questions that challenge traditional assumptions about literature and culture. Some of the key questions asked by postmodern literary critics include: 1. What is the relationship between language, power, and knowledge? 2. How do different forms of representation, such as images and texts, construct meaning and shape our perceptions of reality? 3. What is the relationship between fiction and reality? And how can literature reflect or subvert dominant cultural narratives? 4. How do cultural and historical contexts shape literary production and reception? 5. What is the role of the author in the production of meaning? And how does authorship relate to questions of power and authority? 6. How do different literary genres and forms reflect or subvert dominant cultural narratives? 7. How does the fragmentation and dislocation of contemporary culture shape literary production and reception? 8. How do new media and digital technologies impact literary production and reception? These questions reflect the postmodern emphasis on the contingency and instability of meaning, and challenge traditional assumptions about the role of literature and culture in shaping our understanding of the world. Overall, postmodern critical theory in literature seeks to challenge traditional ways of understanding and interpreting literature, emphasizing the role of language, power, and culture in shaping meaning.